My name is Dr. Joe Friedoff, and I am the lead author of Michigan's K-12 Virtual Learning Effectiveness Report. In this presentation, I'll share some of the key trends from the report, which provides a comprehensive picture of virtual learning for the 23-24 school year. The data discussed come from what Michigan schools reported to the state as part of the Michigan Student Data System collection. It's comprehensive in nature and represents the various types and providers of virtual learning occurring in the state. In our time together, I'm going to focus on 5 key takeaways. 1, leveling out. 2, expect the pass rate to drop. 3, many students succeed. 4, economically disadvantaged students' performance continues to lag. And 5, so much data to explore. Let's get to it. The first takeaway is that most of the key virtual learning measures seem to be leveling out after the rise and fall related to the pandemic. This year's report represents the 14th year of data on the effectiveness of virtual learning in Michigan. We have seen the number of virtual learners, top left, grow from over 36,000 to over 400,000, and now back down to around 154,000. The number of virtual enrollments, top right, have grown from just shy of 90,000 to a high of 3.6 million, and now rests around 1 million. The number of schools with virtual learning, bottom left, grew from around 650 to a high of 2,200 schools and now hovers close to 1,400 schools. Key takeaway number 2 is that unfortunately, we have seen the virtual pass rate decline coming out of the pandemic, and we expect that to continue. We are predicting that this decline, which began after seeing a record high of 74% in the 2021 school year, will continue, based mainly on 2 observations. The first is that the percentage of alternative education enrollments remains below pre-pandemic levels. Depicted in the darker green, or the bottommost stack segment, alternative ed enrollments represented close to half of all virtual enrollments prior to the pandemic. At the height of the pandemic, that percentage dropped to around 10%. As the pandemic has subsided, we have seen the percentage steadily rebound, but it is still about 7 percentage points lower than before the pandemic. This matters because of the sizable difference in pass rates between alternative and general education populations. In the chart above, you can see that the alternative education line, the bottom line, consistently trends below that of the general education line. Thus, as the percentage of alternative education enrollments increases, we would predict the virtual pass rate to decrease. The second observation relates to the grade levels of virtual learners. Consider that in the 2019-2020 school year, about 80% of the enrollments were from students in grades 9 through 12, represented here in orange, or the bottommost stack segment. That percentage was cut in half for the 2021 school year. As the pandemic has subsided, the percentage of enrollments from high school students has trended up toward pre-pandemic levels, but is still 10 percentage points lower. Just like the general education students outperform alternative education students on average, students in lower grades tend to perform better than students in higher grades. In this chart, the blue and green lines display the elementary and middle school virtual pass rate averages by year. Notice that these 2 lines are almost always above the 4 orange lines, which represent the high school grades, especially for grades 9 and 10. If the percentage of high school enrollments return back towards pre-pandemic levels, we will likely continue to see a decline in the virtual pass rate. The bottom line, though, is that while we still expect the virtual pass rate to drop, we don't expect it to fall all the way to pre-pandemic levels. Before the pandemic, the virtual pass rate flattened out at about 55%. If the performance levels from 2023 to 24 continue to hold, the rebalancing effect of alt ed in high school suggests the new virtual pass rate floor to be around 60%, which is a 5 percentage point gain over the pre-pandemic levels. Our third key takeaway is that many Michigan students are succeeding with virtual learning. Consider that over 154,000 Michigan K-12 public school students were reported as having taken at least one virtual course. Over half of them passed every single virtual course they took. This represented close to 80,000 learners from almost 1,300 schools who total nearly 380,000 virtual enrollments. This also means that over 90% of schools with virtual learners had at least one student who experienced perfect success with their virtual coursework. Our fourth key takeaway is one we've been repeating since the first report. Students who are economically disadvantaged underperform compared to their non-economically disadvantaged peers. 64% of virtual learners were classified as economically disadvantaged. This was 1 percentage point higher than last year and about 10 percentage points higher than the percentage of K-12 students statewide who were economically disadvantaged. Economically disadvantaged students took 71% of the virtual enrollments for the year. When it came to performance, students who were not economically disadvantaged had a 77% pass rate, the gray balloon, whereas the rate for those who were was 58%, the orange balloon. This 19 percentage point gap was 2 percentage points larger than the prior year. Our final takeaway is that this report and its related resources are chock full of awesome data. The effectiveness report provides readers with a huge amount of information to explore. For instance, the visual on the screen represents how the percentage of virtual learners differed by key variables. To illustrate, if we look at the lighter orange wedge around 4 o'clock, we see that 74% of virtual learners were in grades 9 through 12. If we look at the gray wedges located around 7 to 8 o'clock, we see that 14% of virtual learners use special education services, quite similar to the overall percentage in the state. The report also includes a one-page infographic capturing many key findings from the report, as well as containing a link to the full report itself. In April, we'll be mailing the infographic out to school leaders, and we hope that this report and the various resources shared help program leaders reflect on, evaluate, and improve their virtual learning programs. There are also over 90 data tables in the report's appendices. If you don't find what you're looking for in the report's narrative, be sure to explore the tables. To get an idea of where virtual learners were coming from, the report also includes a couple of maps. The map on this slide shows the percentage of students in each ISD or RESA that took at least one virtual course from a non-cyber school in the 23-24 school year. The darker the blue, the higher the percentage of students who took a virtual course. Since cyber schools do not have their own resident district, but rather draw students from other districts to attend their schools, this map shows where the cyber school students were actually located. The darker the orange, the higher the number of cyber school students drawn from that area. We are especially excited about the new virtual benchmarking tool that we released recently. This tool allows users to select from filters to dial in the characteristics of the students they serve. This can be helpful in identifying more precise performance measures to evaluate their own virtual programs. Use the View Benchmark Resource button located above the report's introduction heading to check out the tool. School leaders looking to take additional steps forward with their virtual programs may find value in many of the free resources Michigan Virtual has authored. These resources include a series of practical guides to online learning designed for students, parents, teachers, mentors, school administrators, and school board members. The resources page also includes a link to the National Standards for Quality Online Learning, which offer frameworks to evaluate online programs, online teaching, and online courses. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. The report is available on our website through the URL on the screen. The infographic and benchmarks resources referenced can also be accessed through that page. Thanks again for your time, and please reach out if you have any questions.